Welcome back. Last time we were talking about the avian nervous system, specifically the central nervous system. And today and in the next lecture, we're going to be looking at how birds perceive the world with their sensory biology equipment, what kind of receptors, special senses they have. Birds have the ability to navigate with celestial compasses and see magnetic fields. They have a lot of different sensory biology than we have, but their senses are really governed by the most important sense for birds is by far and away their vision. Their vision is more highly developed than any other vertebrate, including humans. And like we said with the brain the other day, that just the amount of space relegated to different parts of the brain can tell you something about how important a structure or a function is. The same goes for the dominance of bird eyes. So bird eyes are huge relative to the rest of their bodies. And so that tells you right away that vision is incredibly important for birds. So like I said, the eyes are huge relative to the size of their heads. Proportionally, they're much larger than human eyes are. If you consider the eyes of eagles and owls, they're about the same size as human eyes or larger. And then the size of the ostrich, their eyes are about twice the size of a human eye. So clearly very, very important. And the eyes of songbirds are about the same size as their brains. So think about the size of your eyeball versus the size of your brain. There's a bit of a difference there. Okay, so what we're going to do first is get to know the bird, the avian eye, with a drawing. There's that one that I I failed to record me doing last time. Ta-da! And I realized I can't spell anatomy. Anyway, on to the eye. Okay, so the shape of the avian eye is a little different than the human or the mammalian eye. And I'm going to use colors to kind of show you the different parts. So first of all, I'm going to make this big globular part. And I wish I had a different, I do it to blue. And then there's this little loopy, more narrowed part. So just to orient you, this will be the anterior of the bird. This is posterior. So the posterior side will be back into the skull. Okay. The eyeball is roughly divided into two parts by some musculature. And actually, birds have some bones right around here while I'm drawing that mammals don't have. But for now, what I want to do is show you that the eye is divided into an anterior segment and a posterior segment. This thing in the middle, I should have used a different color, is the lens. And in the mammalian eye, it's quite spherical and it looks like a bead. It's a hard structure. All right, and so it's not exactly, well, it's clear, it's transparent. The other part I have here, okay, so you have the lens in the middle. This is called the cornea, and it is another transparent part of the eyeball. In the mammalian eye, We have muscles that control how the light bends, how the lens reflects or curves the light. And birds, both the cornea and the lens, are able to move to adjust light. So there's a second group of muscles. I don't care that you know the name, but what I want you to know is that both the cornea and the lens bend light. That is unique to birds. Okay, cornea and lens change their curvature to focus light on the retina. I have not told you where the retina is yet, but we're getting to it. Okay, so this darker blue part of the eye, this part, this is called the sclera, and it's essentially the white of your eye. So you can see your sclera, and it's continuous with the cornea, but the cornea is like this transparent part of the sclera. The rest of the sclera is white and opaque. Okay. Now you have another layer. Your eyeball is, and I'm not going to do this well, this red layer is tight to the sclera, but on the inside, oh, that's too far away. Okay. So imagine like a tennis ball, and you know there's all that green fluff on the outside. The green fluff is the sclera, and if you were to like shave it or scratch all that green stuff off, there'd be like, you know, a brown bouncy ball layer. That's this next red layer. That's called the choroid. And the choroid is highly vascularized. So that's where they get a lot of the blood flow goes through the choroid. The sclera is basically just a tough connective tissue layer. So none of this so far has anything to do with vision, okay? Right now, this is just the eyeball itself. I'm going to use yellow to show you the inner layer. So if you go back to your tennis ball, we had scratched off all of the green fuzz and revealed a brown bouncy ball layer. On the inside of that bouncy ball layer, I wish I had a thicker, there we go, thicker pen. This is the retina. The retina is the layer of the eyeball that has the cells that are responsible for vision, the receptors. We know they are rods and cones. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to sketch from a different angle. So there's my cornea, my lens, and the posterior side of my eye. I know it looks kind of wonky, but if this is the retina and, you know, light is coming this way towards the eyeball, basically, so the cornea here and the lens are both going to bend to focus light to one point on the retina, which is the yellow part. Okay, so that's how eyeballs work, is that they bend light to focus it onto a part of the retina. All right. What else? Okay. What color eyes does your bird have? My bird's going to have green eyes. The colored part of your eye is the iris. That's the color you tell people. My eye is brown or blue or whatever. Gray. And then kind of in the middle of that is like a hole, right? Okay, so the hole is the pupil. And it is just a hole. It can change diameter with these muscles. So when it's really dark outside or it's getting dark and you need more light to make your retina work properly, then your pupils will dilate and get larger. When it's really, really sunny outside and really bright, and you're like, you're gonna fry my retina, then it squeezes up into a tiny little hole. Okay, so that's the pupil. And then the colored part around that, that's the iris. And in birds, the iris can be lots of different colors. So it can be brown, red, white, as well as blue, yellow, green. There are more eye options in birds than in humans. Oh, one other thing. So in birds, the pupil is round, and almost all birds round, like yours. There are a few, that have a snake-like slit, but most of them are round. So there's a couple of different shapes of pupils. Okay, what's inside? This, I'm trying to decide what color to make this. That space between the cornea and the lens is one like little room, one chamber. It is filled with really watery stuff called aqueous humor. Aqueous humor. The posterior segment is filled with vitreous humor. The vitreous humor is more jelly-like. The aqueous humor is more water-like. Now, are you ready for the cool bird adaptation? No, you are. I'm thinking of how best to, I want to give this to you just the right way. Check this out. In most vertebrates, the density of light receptors meaning rods and cones is constricted, is limited, constrained by limited blood supply. Get this, there is a trade-off in your eye because it's sort of built funny, it's kind of backwards, that you need blood vessels to keep your rods and cones doing their thing. We need blood to make them work. And you need lots of them to see well. But there's a limit. So every time, if you have too many blood vessels feeding your eyeballs, you can't see anything. There's a trade-off between vision and blood supply. That's a problem. Okay, so we have this trade-off. You can have great vision, or you can have, no, that doesn't make sense. Basically, there's a trade-off. Let's see if I can just say it. That you have to have great vision, you need lots of rods and cones. To have lots of rods and cones, you need lots of blood supply. But blood supply limits your vision. So we're stuck, we're constrained. Does that make sense? Wish you guys were in my classroom right now. So check it out. Birds have figured out a better solution. They don't even have to deal with it because they're birds and they know they're awesome. Birds have this well, it's fine, black. Have this neat, wacky invention, and I'm kind of drawing it like, I know it looks like a feather. I don't know. It doesn't really look like a feather, but there is this structure inside the posterior segment of the eye. And in some birds, it's this large that like it almost runs into the lens. It is called the pecten. And for a long, long time, we didn't know what it was doing. We didn't know what function it served. But now we know. What a great age we are living in. You will see it is connected. I meant to draw it in yellow. To this tube over here, and that is the optic nerve. Okay, the pecten. Are you on the edge of your seats? Should be. The pecten is a unique evolutionary innovation just for birds. I think of the pecten as kind of like a gill inside their eyeball, in that it is highly vascularized. It's like this folded sheet of tissue with tons of blood vessels so that it doesn't obscure their vision, right? So they don't have to have it on the retina. They put it in the pecten. The pecten does all of the blood supply diffusion stuff. So cool. So it also eliminates, well, don't worry about that part. We have a blind spot that birds basically don't have. It has, in most birds, I told you there's this highly folded thing. Most birds have about 20 folds. But nocturnal species have much fewer because they rely less on their vision at night. Okay, so it's highly vascularized. That means it's going to give them their receptor cells have a rich supply of nutrients. The pecten, so neat, and really is kind of like a gill. So they do gas exchange, like let's see which way, CO2 and O2, to supply the retina. And they can, by shifting their head around, increase diffusion of those gases with the pecten. Wild. Okay, what else can I tell you about the amazing eyeball? They have, most birds have, and we do too, there's an area on the retina where you have the highest concentration of cone cells, and that's called the fovea. And when you're reading or looking at something, you will position your eye so that it is focused on the fovea. So this is the highest concentration of cones. That means your sharpest vision. Most birds, like most vertebrates, have one fovea on the sort of back part of the retina. There are also some birds that have a second one close to their temporal bone, and it's called the temporal fovea. So some birds have two, which is unusual. Okay, couple more notes while we are, in the whiteboard. Let's talk about our light receptor cells. All right, so we have rods, which are the cells that distinguish black and white. And they work well under dim light. So it's kind of grayscale, right? If you imagine, like if you turn off your lights or turn them down really low, you'll find that your rods kick in and your cones go to sleep. So even with just dim light, like look at the color or something, right? Like I have a pink stapler. And if I turned off my lights or turned them down, it would be hard to distinguish this color because my cones would not be able to work so well under dim light, but my rods would continue to fire. All right. So then you have cones, which are cells that distinguish color. They have, okay, this is different. And I'm not going to worry too much about this, but just so you're aware, birds actually have something called double cones, which makes me want a double dip cone, ice cream cone, double cones. And we're not really sure what this does to their light perception, but it's thought that it probably plays into the brightness of color. Brightness. Maybe. Still trying to figure that out. So if I told you that one animal had 1 million light receptors in their retina and another one had 5 million, who do you think has better vision? The one with more receptors. So birds have a lot of receptors, of course. House sparrows, just to give you a feel for this, have 400,000 cones per square millimeter. That's a lot. Oh, cones. The common buzzard has 1 million cones per millimeter squared. How many do you have? You ready? 200,000 cones per millimeter squared. Sorry, friends, our eyes are not nearly as good as a bird's eye. Another thing, so clearly we don't see as well, but you also should remember, because we talked about it when we talked about feather color some weeks back, how many cone types do they have? How many types do you have? Humans have 3 types of cone cells. Or trichromatic. Birds have 4 cone types. So they see in a greater range on the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So you know that they can see in UV. And so it's really even hard for us to understand what the world looks like to them, because the interaction of these 4 cones is something that we can't quite wrap our heads around. But surely I can tell you they see more color and they see better and they see under dimmer lights than we do. Okay, so hopefully you've done some beautiful artwork. You have an idea of how their eyes work. We'll come back in just a second and continue this fascinating discussion.